Shalom, good evening. This is TV7 Israel News broadcast to you from Jerusalem. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu blames the Islamist Hamas terror organization for the resumption of hostilities in the Gaza Strip. The Iranian proxy Ansar Allah, which is dominated by the Houthi tribe in Yemen, resumes ballistic missile fire toward Israel. U.S. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth re-emphasizes that the United States will not allow Iran to attain nuclear weapon capabilities. The Islamist Hamas terror organization is solely to blame for the latest escalation in the Gaza Strip, as it continues to blatantly refuse to release the remaining 59 hostages in captivity in the Gaza Strip. Amid a growing number of international condemnations over reports assessing hundreds of casualties as a result of Israeli strikes on terror infrastructure and terror operatives, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu underscored that Hamas is responsible for this war.
Hamas is responsible for this war. It invaded our towns, murdered our people, raped our women, and kidnapped our loved ones. Hamas refused offer after offer to release our hostages. In the past 2 weeks, Israel did not initiate any military action in the hope that Hamas would change course. Well, that didn't happen. While Israel accepted the offer of President Trump's special envoy, Steve Witkoff, Hamas flatly refused to do so. And this is why I authorized yesterday the renewal of military action against Hamas. Israel does not target Palestinian civilians. We target Hamas terrorists. And when these terrorists embed themselves in civilian areas, when they use civilians as human shields, they're the ones who are responsible for all unintended casualties. Palestinian civilians should avoid any contact with Hamas terrorists. And I call on the people of Gaza, get out of harm's way, move to safer areas. Because every civilian casualty is a tragedy. And every civilian casualty is the fault of Hamas.
Premier Netanyahu went on to thank President Donald Trump for his steadfast support for the State of Israel, while also addressing state actors which are criticizing Israel, essentially rejecting Israel's right to self-defense.
I thank President Trump for his unwavering support for Israel. Our alliance with the United States has never been stronger. To those who criticize Israel, I ask, what would you do if terrorists murdered and kidnapped your children? You would do what we are doing. In the face of pure evil, free societies have no choice but to fight. So I want to assure all our friends around the world, Israel will fight and Israel will win. We will bring our people home and we will destroy Hamas. We will not relent until we achieve all these vital goals. And we will not rest until we give our country a future of peace, prosperity, and hope.
Meanwhile, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres voiced outrage over Israel's decision to hold the Islamist Hamas accountable for its refusal to accept two separate proposals for an extension of the ceasefire that would have also granted the terror group additional concessions in exchange for the release of hostages.
Unfortunately, we are witnessing a situation in which we had an intolerable level of suffering for the Palestinian people with the air raids that killed hundreds of people. We have humanitarian aid still blocked.
In addition to the UN Secretary General's rebuke of Israel, irrespective of the fact that Hamas continues to refuse the release of any hostages, the UN Security Council held a session on the situation in the Gaza Strip, during the course of which the world body's Under-Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs insisted that the resumption of hostilities in the Gaza Strip must cease immediately, while stressing further that international law, in relation to the delivery of humanitarian aid to the population of the Gaza Strip, must be respected.
This total blockade of life-saving aid, basic commodities, and commercial goods will have a disastrous impact on the people of Gaza, who remain dependent on the steady flow of assistance into the Strip. We cannot and must not accept a return to pre-ceasefire conditions or the complete denial of humanitarian relief. Civilians must be protected. Their essential needs must be met. International law must be respected. The return to hostilities overnight must cease.
It is important to once again highlight that according to international humanitarian law, per the Geneva Convention, Article 23, Israel is not obligated to provide humanitarian aid to the Gaza Strip if there is serious reasons for fearing that the aid may be diverted from their destination and that a definite advantage may accrue to the military efforts or economy of the enemy. Meanwhile, Israel's ambassador to the United Nations, Ambassador Dani Danon, responded to calls by the world body to end the war in the Gaza Strip.
The Israeli Air Force initiated a series of attacks against Hamas targets in Gaza. We will show no mercy on our enemies. Let me be very clear. Israel will not stop until all of our hostages are back home. We will make it very clear to the Security Council that if they want to stop the war in Gaza, they have to ensure that the hostages are coming back to Israel. We are committed to bring them back.
It is important to know that Israel's decision to relaunch its military campaign against the Islamist Hamas, which is a designated terrorist organization by a long list of state actors and institutions, includes Australia, Canada, Japan, the United Kingdom, New Zealand, the United States, and the European Union, was done in full coordination with the Trump administration.
Well, the Trump administration and the White House were consulted by the Israelis on their attacks in Gaza tonight. And as President Trump has made it clear, Hamas, the Houthis, Iran, all those who seek to terrorize not just Israel, but also the United States of America, will see a price to pay. All hell will break loose.
Despite the U.S. putting both Iran and the Houthis on notice, the latter terror group launched a ballistic missile toward Israeli territory yesterday, triggering rocket alert sirens in several areas in southern Israel. According to the IDF spokesperson's unit, a missile launched from Yemen was intercepted by the Israel Air Force prior to crossing into Israeli territory. Sirens were sounded in accordance with protocol. The blatant attack by the Iranian proxy in Yemen comes after the leader of the Houthi terrorist group announced the resumption of hostilities against Israel amid an American military campaign aimed at terminating attacks by the Iranian proxy against international shipping lanes in the strategic Strait of Bab el-Mandeb and adjacent waterways.
نقدم أيضا من جديد التحذير للأمريكي أن استمراره في عدوانه على بلدنا إسنادا منه للعدو الإسرائيلي إنما يدفع بنا إلى مواجهة تصعيده بخيارات تصعيدية إضافية. نحن نواجه الآن عدوانه بالاستهداف لحاملة طائراته، بالاستهداف لبوارجه وقطعه الحربية في البحر.
Despite repeated statements by the Islamic Republic of Iran claiming it has nothing to do with Houthi belligerence against freedom of international navigation, U.S. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth said in an exclusive interview with Fox News that the Islamic Republic was utilizing the Houthis in Yemen as a last standing pillar of its axis of evil.
Iran is in a very weakened state. When you mentioned it, Hezbollah, you mentioned it, Hamas. You look at what happened in Syria with the collapse of that regime, which was a client state of Iran. And ultimately, a lot of their insurgent groups in Iraq have pulled back as well. But it doesn't mean they still don't have the desire. Their air defenses are weakened. And that's why they're in a position where they're supporting groups like the Houthis, because they, in some ways, have to move to other options to try to agitate and instigate in the region. This is a critical moment for them.
The Pentagon's top official went on to stress that Iran will be held accountable for its support of terror groups against the United States and its partners and allies in the region, while further highlighting that the Islamic Republic would not be allowed to attain nuclear weapon capabilities.
Nobody wants a military option as it pertains to Iran. So he is, through maximum pressure, just as he did in his first administration, maximum pressure bankrupt the Iranians. Well, under Joe Biden, what happened? They took off that maximum pressure, and groups like the Houthis were awash in cash. Then they got arrogant, started shooting at our ships. We look weak. Not anymore. Not under President Trump. That will stop. The Houthis shooting at our ships will stop. Iran must get that clear message and negotiate the end of their pursuit for nuclear weapons because, as I mentioned, President Trump has said clearly they will not get a bomb.
Meanwhile, in Tehran, the Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesman noted that the Ayatollah regime will respond to any attack against it, brazenly claiming further that it is unjustly being targeted due to its support for the Palestinians. Thank you for watching TV7 Israel News. It is important to know that TV7 Israel is a non-profit ministry with all of our productions exclusively reliant on your generosity. Therefore, if you're blessed by the content of our programs, I would like to encourage you to support TV7 Israel. You can donate via our website at www.tv7israelnews.com. Separately, I'd like also to encourage you, pray for the peace of Jerusalem and salvation of Israel. I'm Jonathan Hessen wishing you an Erev Mevorach. God willing, we will see you during our next update. Until then, Shalom from Jerusalem.